The Buzz with Jess Lujan.
We're back, main studio guest, Dr. Ron McNish and Ryan St. Nicholas. We're talking about former senator and talk show host of Positively Local, Tony Blas. Doc, my question to you, again, how important is all this that what basically Sus Chamorro, Tony Blas picked up, and now I'm kind of picking up as well. I'm not doing as good a job as Tony and Sus Chamorro are doing, but still doing it anyway. How important is that, what they put into that?
Sure, and by the way, you have a very strong following also, and I think that in general, this is what happens, and this is the difference between talk radio and news, particularly on Guam. What happens is when people are listening to talk radio, they're not listening to it as if it's the news. They're listening to it and participating with it mentally as if it's a conversation they're a part of. And so when people would listen to Tony Blas on Positively Local, they felt they were part of the conversation and they had an active voice in that conversation. And that was the difference. And I think that then when people would later go to other events and talk to other people, when they talk about what they heard on the show, it's as if it's a conversation they actually had with Tony and his listeners. And the same goes for other radio shows, but Tony made this, really actualized this for talk radio because he was so connected with people. Anyone who met Tony would know Tony very, very quickly, and they would feel very comfortable and friendly with him, and he would have a genuine conversation with them right away. I know I've mentioned this before, within minutes of meeting a person, particularly a person from Guam, Tony would determine how they were related to each other. And he knew everybody who was married to everybody else, and everyone's children and their grandchildren, and he knew those networks extremely well, and he was able to connect with those networks and follow them down.
Yeah, he knew my family both sides.
And the other side, right?
And the other side.
Now, let me ask you this, because one thing I noticed with this as well, and because I actually was serving the legislature during the Lola Cola, and you guys were staunch. I mean, you were on it. You were on it constantly. But one of the things that I got out of Tony and listening to him was that, and when you compare it to other organizations, was that I remember when the Lola Cola was being pushed, right? And we know years back, Gov Guam didn't go to the bond market. They went to the retirement fund. That was their bond market. That was their bond market. So when it came time, retirement fund, where it's at this point, with this cola situation, right? And so Tony gave it a life in the sense that he stood up for the the retirees, whereas other organizations will say, hey, these retirees are always looking for a handout, always gimme. It's never what can I do for this. It's always a gimme. Tony turned that around and says, hey, wait a minute, they were the bankers. They were Gov Guam's bankers for the longest time. You never paid them back and all this. So actually, and that's one of the genesis on my introduction of paying the COLA recipients, again, the interest incurred and how much you owed, and we were successful in that as well, because that's right. If the government of Guam, or you owe the government of Guam and you haven't paid your debt, I mean, you have to pay it back with interest. Why shouldn't you do the same thing? So
you're right, and he questioned the actions of the governor at the time. He questions the actions of the senators. He even questioned the actions of the retirement board. Saying that, hey, you guys are the protectors of the retirement fund. Why are you just letting them run rampant, rape and pillage, on the fund? And he had such a profound effect on the Lola Cola issue that he was appointed, I believe, as a board member to the retirement fund. Being the voice of the people, and a lot of people actually backed it up because, Tony being the watchdog there, they knew that the retirement fund was going to be protected one way or the other. And, the Lola Cola story is just another success that we actually went through. People got, what they were due. Military issue is another thing too as well, that he had the foresight that this thing is going to be, an explosion waiting to happen, pretty much, a time bomb, if we didn't take care of it now. And he kept, saying, how are we going to fit these people? Where are they going to be at? How is it going to be an impact on the environment? There were so many questions that he was posing, and they're still being asked today, even with the study that had just came out. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, man, hindsight, looking back, this guy was such a visionary that he knew things were going to happen way before.
And it was a play. He was there. I mean, when you compare that, and Doc, when you compare that, I mean, we have national elections going on now. I mean, of course, we have local elections as well. But how do you compare, again, one that was in there, that knew the ins and outs, versus, and he's Tony, myself as well, we're political pundits as well. But we were there. Tony was there as well to a greater degree, that he was an insider, knew how things were made, how things maneuvered, within the bureaucracy. So how do you compare the two? Strictly a pundit versus one that was there and a pundit?
Sure. He certainly had a unique view, but also he had a critical understanding about how things really work. He didn't put up with people's BS descriptions of things. He would get right to the heart of the matter, and he had a keen intellect. His depth of understanding how things really work and how things really get done was excellent. He had a wonderful political acumen and insight. And there's another thing about Tony, and I know that it may be hard for some viewers to understand. In politics, loyalty is everything. And Tony was probably one of the most loyal Republicans I've ever met in my life. And I've known many Republicans. He was absolutely devoted to the Republican Party. He was absolutely a steadfast supporter of Guam's Republican Party. He was a steadfast supporter of the governor, Governor Calvo. He was a steadfast supporter of Governor Camacho. And he was genuine in all of these efforts to be a good public servant and to serve the people. And I think that that's the point that Ryan also touched upon. Tony Blas served the people. He helped people. And that was what he really enjoyed doing, was using his access, using his various powers that he had to truly serve people and help people.
And so, and going to again, public administration, he truly was a public administrator.
Sure, no question.
5 years in the legislature. Prior to that, he was a director. 5 years in radio, going to being a director again at the Department of Administration. The one thing that I took away from Tony, and I still keep with me to this day, is that he taught me that public service is a 24-hour deal. It doesn't stop. If you see somebody that needs help, and if you could help them, do it. And I think that's a genuine trait for somebody to have.
See, so now, Ryan, that being said, you used to produce Tony Blas's show, used to produce my show, okay? We're looking at you to be the next public servant as well.
Okay, I'm running not. As long as he's going to be my campaign chair.
Doc, one of the things I remember, I mean, when you look at the legislature, and there are things that stand out in legislative times, right? Two things stand out, basically. One not so well, the Chile fight that happened, okay? The other one was, and both of them are lethal, okay?
Yeah.
One of them, of course, is the resolution that Tony Blas had sponsored, and it became a big thing because the whole island was involved, and senators, the resolution where you had a time in Guam where you had two sides. One wasn't wanted a new administration in the midst of an ongoing administration. So people wanted a certain administration now. That was the Gutierrez-Bordallo administration. So Tony, said, hey, we can't just do it this way. So he put out a resolution to allow the people of Guam, the right to vote whether or not to retain or to remove it.
It was such a controversial issue back then, and it stretched up.
Yeah.
His first guest on the first day of his show was the same person that he wrote that resolution.
That's what-
was Governor Gutierrez.
Governor Gutierrez,
You
yeah.
know, but you see, I mean, it goes back to what Ron said, that he wouldn't shy away from controversy. He knew that, hey, look, if you know, the only way to start out the show is to pick up where he left off. You know, because right after that resolution, the following election, he did not make it.
Yeah.
And that was still haunting him.
But also not just that, but it was lethal for the ones that for the most actually the lethal side of it was mostly borne by the Republican side in regards to the senators that voted not to give the people the right to vote. So it was a career. Well, it was a senatorial career ending.
And
for,
at that
for,
time,
yeah.
the Republicans were the majority.
Majority,
right?
yeah,
And then
yeah.
you had mentioned that right after that resolution and everything, many Republicans got out, and the Democrats ended up taking over for how many years? Yeah.
Doc, again.
Well,
final
I think
thoughts on that? Yeah.
one of the interesting things is after the Chile fight, when you had a Democrat speaker, Democrat majority, that was really the sparking point that then shifted to a Republican majority. There's an important point, and Tony is like the epitome, the example of this. The Republicans, when they returned in January, they came back in coats and ties, and they said, we don't want to have any more nonsense. We're going to do things differently. We're going to take this job seriously. And they tried to restore faith in the public and in the legislature, because at that time the legislature took a big hit from these behaviors. And Tony was one of the major players in making sure that the public's confidence in the legislature was restored.
We're going to take a quick break, pay some bills, and we'll be right back with closing comments.